Hey, what's up? Hello, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about. My name's Matt.
And my name is Dyl, and today we are continuing our series of revisiting Best Picture nominees, and we have a very interesting one up today. Tar. This is one that I know Matt and I were both not the highest the first time around, but I know he liked it more the second time. I still have a lot of problems with it, but we do have a guest. So Matt, do you want to introduce our guest so we can get their opinions on this movie as well?
Of course. So, Sierra, welcome in. This is my fiancée, Sierra, who is an actor and is here to give us the actor's perspective on Cate Blanchett in Tar today. So, thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
So, let's get right into Tar. This is a movie that, like you said, Dylan, we were both very cold on at first, and we gave, not a negative review, but a very mixed review, and we had some angry people in the comments about that. But I thought it was really cold the first time I watched it. I found it to be pretty boring that time. I definitely found it interesting, but I didn't really love it. And this time around, rewatching it, this is why I love doing this series of revisiting Best Picture nominees. This time, I got it. It clicked for me. I thought it was incredible. I viewed it this time as a ghost story, and having the ability to pause the movie and talk about something. Like, we were sitting on the couch just discussing everything that was going on, and it made it really enjoyable. So, Dylan, I know that the first time we watched, you were a little bit more favorable than I was, but what did you think about it this time on a rewatch?
Well, I'm glad that you got it, because I definitely didn't. Tar is a movie that I very much appreciate, but it's not a movie I very much like. Like we talked about the first time, I think I gave it a very strong 6, a light 7, because there's so much here that I love, but there's so much I'm just not grasping and I'm not on the same wavelength with. I think it's so well directed by Todd Field. The pacing, especially in the first hour 50, the majority of the movie is so well done. It's very well written, very well acted. The crafts are on another level, just like I mentioned. I don't connect, I don't resonate, and it really just doesn't work for me. And especially once Francesca quits, from that point to the end of the movie was very much just not on my wavelength. I was very much off in the left field. I really didn't get it. I also watched this movie with someone. I watched it with my grandma. She's been watching all these Best Picture movies with me, and this was by far her least favorite. Everything else she's given a 7 or above. This was a 2 to her. She just very much did not enjoy this, did not get it, very much didn't like it, which I think is very interesting.
But let's talk to our guest this week about Tar. Just generally, how did you feel about Tar? This is your first time watching it. You didn't come to see it with me in theaters, so.
Yeah. It was funny because when you saw it in theaters and you came back home, you were like, oh, you're really not going to like it. It's not your kind of movie at all, Sierra. You're going to have to watch it eventually, because I always make sure I watch all of the Best Picture nominees. But so I really wasn't going into it with a lot of big enthusiasm. I was excited because I knew that Cate Blanchett was apparently amazing, and I was really excited to see that, just from an acting standpoint. But I did have the Nintendo Switch with Pokemon going throughout, I did have the Nintendo Switch in case I got bored, but I actually ended up putting it down pretty early on in the film because I really liked it. I really came at it from more of a perspective of the acting. I never really watched, I never remember the cinematography, or I never remember especially the sound design. I don't really pick up on that stuff as much as Matt does, but I really enjoyed her performance. It was long. It was a very long movie, but I think she really, and the entire ensemble at that too, really did a good job. I don't know what to say.
Well, I mean, you got into it there, but you really can't talk about this movie without talking about how amazing Cate Blanchett is. Mm-hmm. She just gives so much to this role. She really becomes Lydia Tarr, and something that I've seen a lot of people say is that when this movie finishes, they can't believe that this is not a real person that this role is based on. So I want to ask you, Sierra, just how did you feel about Cate Blanchett, and what was it that she was doing that was so impressive?
So I always say with Cate Blanchett, I love her performances. They're phenomenal. But I find that she always plays a very powerful, righteous kind of character, which fits her so well.
Very posh.
Very posh, yeah. Very, very posh. and everything that I've seen her in recently. So seeing her play someone who in the end falls apart, I guess, was so cool. And I was enthralled by her performance. I thought it was fantastic. And even in all the complicated verbiage that she had, especially having to learn an entire new language, it just flowed out of her so easily, and saying all of those fancy terms and things that I could never imagine saying in a normal conversation. It just flowed, and I love when I watch something that I can see the process the actor took to get there, and I could see she really, really dove into this character and everything.
Yeah, I would say for all my issues with this film, she would still be my personal pick out of our actress lineup that we have at the Oscars. I just think it just speaks to how strong of a performance she is that I'm not really a fan of this movie, but I just think she's so phenomenal. She's just, like Matt mentioned, fully able to become this character. Like, you wouldn't think, like, if you think of Tar, like, going forward, like, even if Tar was a real person, I feel like you would think of Cate Blanchett's performance. You wouldn't think of the actual person. But obviously, this is a fictitious character. But she's able to command the screen, be so tough, be so rigorous, to just make this character feel so real, so grounded. Like, this is something that you could run into on the street, or turn your TV on and see a news from whatever it's like CNN or ABC, be like, Tar's down far, and then you start off with like the top of her career to see it go down and down and down. What I think really works about this performance is how you're introduced to the character through that New Yorker scene. You're just able to grasp so much about this character without having to like see it play out. Like, yeah, maybe it's a little on the nose, or maybe it's a little force fed, but like, you know everything about this person within like 10 minutes into the movie.
Totally.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioning that scene kind of brings up, I feel like this movie is best thought about as a collection of scenes and a collection of moments that Blanchett is just giving her all into. And there's two acting moments that I really want to point out and draw attention to. And the two moments that I want to talk about are the scene where Blanchett returns home, where Tar goes back to her childhood home, and she watches a tape of Leonard Bernstein, who it feels like she never met, and she was just lying about so that she could have the credibility, and that her entire relationship with Leonard Bernstein was just her watching these videotapes as a child. But that scene where she's sitting in front of the TV, you just see all of the pretension and the shittiness of this person fade away, and she becomes a child. It's like a real-life version of the scene from Ratatouille, where the critic eats the food, and he's transported back to his childhood. That's what that moment feels like when Tar is sitting in front of the TV and just weeping, and you see the person that she wanted to be, and the way that her life did and did not turn out that way. So fantastic. But the other scene that really stuck with me this time, this isn't even an acting moment. It was just a really crazy clue about the movie, where she's listening to NPR radio in her bathroom, and she's repeating what the reporter is saying on the radio, because she's trying to get her accent down, because she's trying to make sure her voice sounds perfect, and it has to be exactly the way that it should sound to fit in with the world that she wants to be in. Fantastic writing, fantastic acting. Were there any specific scenes or moments that really stood out to you, Dylan?
Yeah, before I dive into that, I just want to like backpack off that NPR scene. I didn't notice it the first time around, but this time around, the show that she's listening to was the show that played before mine when I had my radio show in college. Like, oh, wow, I know that show. Wow. But
did you ever try to copy the voice?
Sadly, I did not. I don't think I could pull that off. I don't have the boldness and the grandness of one Cate Blanchett. I'm not even going to attempt to say it in the way Tarantino did at the Globes. But to answer your question, it's the one I feel like everyone has talked about, but it would be the Juilliard scene. Like, that sequence is everything that I love about this film into one, I would say, 10-minute stretch. I meant to time it out when I watched it this time, just so I could be like, oh, this whatever one take is just brilliant. But yes, the performance in this scene, the script, all into one, it just encapsulates everything that is great about Tar, in my opinion. It's able to discuss its themes in a nuanced way that sticks with you long past the end credits. Like, it's a movie that I watched originally in like October, I think, and that was a scene I was still thinking about when we were doing our like year-end list in like January. And Blanchett is just so assertive and dominant in this sequence over the young student, and their back and forth, as well as the back and forth she's seeming like she's having internally throughout the conversation as well, I just think is really powerful and really impactful for like what this movie's, I feel like, trying to say.
But Sierra, were there any scenes to you or any moments that really stuck out?
It's always hard when someone asks for like a specific scene, because I feel like when I watch a performance, I kind of see it from beginning to end. Like I don't feel like specific scenes are like more stand out than other scenes, but I think just like I said before, overall, just her dedication to everything was phenomenal. Like every single element of it, even having to learn how to compose and how to speak German, like I said, and all of that. Like I just love when I can see the amount of work that went into it. And it's not even like, a lot of the time when I think of that, it's when someone has to like transform, like Chastain has in so many recent things. Just like her face and everything, and transform into someone. I don't know, she just melts into this character that looks like her and sounds like her, but it's not her. I don't know, the whole performance was just really cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about how she like learned and really inhabited that, I mean, we have to go back to that New Yorker scene that you were talking about, Dylan, where the thing that stands out to me in that scene, I don't know if you felt the same way, but when she's talking about music and when she's talking about Mahler and Mahler's relationship with Alma, it doesn't feel like she's just reading lines. It feels like she's read books about this. It feels like she has not just understood the surface level, like she has a deep understanding of what she's talking about, which I think is so impressive. Like she's studied this stuff.
Yeah. And even when people are like the villain of the story, like in acting, I'm always told like, you have to like your character, you have to understand where your character's coming from, and like they don't know they're the villain. And I feel like she really was able to capture that in like a post-Weinstein era kind of character. Yeah. You know, like she just, I don't know, her villain was fantastic.
That actually brings me to something else I want to talk about, which is that like I have seen a lot of people refer to Cate Blanchett as one of the great villain performances. Like I've seen people put Lydia Tarr on the same level as Daniel Plainview from There Will Be Blood. And I don't think I saw Lydia Tarr in that way. Like I don't know if I saw her as a villain. I mean, she's not a good person in the slightest. She is someone who manipulates. She's someone who grooms. She's someone who bullies. She's not a good person. But Dylan, do you view Tar as a villain? Or how do you see her in this story?
I see Tar as a celebrity. She lives her life of fame. She acts like she has it all, which, I mean, she does for the majority of this movie. And she has people who kind of help her do everything, who may not get the recognition that she gets. But like whether it's her partner or her assistant, they're doing everything essentially for her. She's just the face of it all. And once she gets called out, her life starts to really crumble, and her assistant leaves, her partner backs away, her child is out of her picture, and everything just keeps falling. And I mean, you can find many examples of a real life person who this happened to, whether recently or in years past. But like, I think she's just an example of what like the online term of, I guess, of cancel culture could do to a person who then gets called out and they face the actual forms of the repercussions for their various actions.
It's clear that there's quite a huge divide between audiences and critics. I mean, this is one of the highest rated movies of the year by critics, and yet it made less than $10 million in the box office despite being a wide release. So there's a huge divide between critic and audience reception. And Sierra, I want to ask you, like, why do you think that there is such a huge divide between critic opinion and audiences on this?
That's a really good question, because a lot of the time when Matt, but just because you're the one who introduces me to most of the movies every year, when you talk about a film and you're like, oh, it's got like a 98 on Metacritic and all of that, I immediately know that I'm probably not going to not like the film, but not understand it. Because I feel like sometimes movies, it's almost like they're just a calculus class, and I'm someone who is just not great with numbers, and I'm supposed to watch it and understand this great calculus like equation, and then I kind of almost leave feeling like stupid in a way. I don't really know exactly how to word it, but sometimes with movies that are super artsy or indie or anything like that, that get a high critic response, I feel like I'm almost missing something. Like in Ratatouille, some of the dishes that people are like, oh my gosh, you got to pay like hundreds of dollars to have this like thing. I like burgers. I don't know. I don't understand like the appeal of that kind of food, and not saying that it makes the movies any less worthy of the critical score and all of that. I just sometimes feel like I don't have the membership to the club.
I think I have to agree with Sierra. I think this is very much a movie made for a specific type of audience, and those audience are the critics, and they're obviously going to eat it up. They're going to love it. There's movies like that every year that are clearly made for a target audience, and you can go in like the reverse side, like coming up Fast 10. Critics probably won't like that, but its core audience of the family are going to love it. So, at least for me with Tar, I did think this was cold and boring at times, and I just think there's a lot that is left open for interpretation, and sometimes that's not what people like. I'm not speaking for myself, but for other people. And there's like a lot of big words and terms that people may not understand or vibe with or get on the same wavelength with. And like I mentioned my grandma earlier who hated this film. However, like to combat the whole like, oh, it's highbrow, it's not her type of thing. She adored women talking. She loved Mass. She thought Power of the Dog was like one of the best movies of last year, all very highbrow type movies. So it's not really that. I think the issue that her and I had with Tar was just it felt very bloated and boring at times, which can be very important for the story. But if you don't eventually reconnect with the story, then you're like, why am I still sitting here? Especially with a movie that's pushing the 2 hour and 40 minute mark.
So something I want to mention, so on to the next question. A big theme of Tar is about appreciating the work of other artists. Like it's sort of a satire on itself, where the poster says Blanchett even before it says Tar, and they're the same size of font. But the movie itself is all about a character who views herself as the only important part of the whole thing. So Lydia Tarr is someone who works at an orchestra, and yet she views the rest of the orchestra as unimportant, and the only thing that's important is what she does. But the film itself is really about appreciating other artists, not just the conductor. That's why the movie starts with 7 minutes of opening credits, so that before the movie even starts, we see every single person who has worked on this film. It's not relegated to afterwards. This is what it is. Everyone is here. It's not just about one person, it's about everyone. So this movie really should be appreciated on a level of looking at all of the artists that worked on this. So I want to know for you guys what other parts of the film stood out besides Blanchett. Because for me, I'd have to mention the production design, which I thought was absolutely beautiful and so geometric, and the way that the camera picked it up, it just has a lot of really hard lines, which I thought was really visually interesting. I don't know, I just loved the visual design of all of these spaces. I thought it was beautiful. But Dylan, what really stood out to you here?
Yeah, I mean, with it being a music movie, obviously the sound's going to stick out, the beautiful like orchestral like movements and everything like that. But I really dug the camera movements. Like I know I've mentioned pacing and you mentioned cinematography, but like I feel like those are all very different type of things. But like the pacing of how the camera moves, specifically in those like one take scenes, I feel like it always knew where it needed to be, where it needed to move for you to see specific people, whether it is the Juilliard scene or the New Yorker scene or some of the other longer extended out sequences. Like it knows what specific people should you be seeing their face, you should be seeing their back of their face, or you should be seeing nothing in that moment. And that's something I very much appreciated more this time around than I did the first time.
Mm-hmm. And Sierra, was there anything that like really stood out to you beyond Blanchett here?
I think honestly for me, which I know I keep coming back to the acting, but is that the ensemble is also extremely talented. And I feel like sometimes when you get a movie that's clearly made like, oh, this is so that, Cate Blanchett, this is her Oscar moment, this is her standout piece. It's like if you were making a movie for Daniel Day-Lewis, you would do it in a very specific way to make him shine. And sometimes I find with those kinds of movies, the actors they hire to be like the wife, to be the child, and to be all of this just aren't given a lot and aren't giving a lot to the story because that actor who's like the main title over the title is obviously trying to showcase like their talent and everything. So I think the coolest thing about this movie though was that wasn't the case. It's that everyone who was on screen was clearly auditioned well, and if this movie had been about their character, they could have led it to the Oscar nomination, just like Blanchett did. And I think that was really neat, like even down to like an office worker. Like that office worker clearly was picked for this role because they were good at it, and it's not just, oh, I guess we need other people in the movie to be there and not overshadow Cate Blanchett, which I think is really cool, because I can think of a few movies recently where I'm like, oh, that's the standout person to me. And to this one, obviously she's literally on the poster, but I think everyone was amazing.
But anyways, I mean, we have to get into the Oscar chances here. Tar has every single major nomination that it needs. It got editing, cinematography, screenplay, directing, actor, picture. That is a perfect package for what it needed. Does it still have a chance at all to win the top prize? Or is it really just Cate Blanchett or nothing?
I feel like with Field and the film losing at BAFTA, that was kind of the nail in the coffin. Because yes, it has all those nominations, but besides Blanchett and maybe a possible WA upset in original screenplay that could carry over to the Oscars, it's not going to win more than one award. And at that point, there's other films that are in that Best Picture contention that's going to take 2 above the line awards or a lot of tech awards. So it's, to me, it's one of those, like, if this was a year 5, it definitely probably would have made that 5, but it's one of those that never really is in that winning conversation.
That concludes our video revisiting Tar. I'm so glad that I got to watch this again, because truly this shot up from a 6 out of 10 to me to a full-on 10 out of 10. I absolutely adore this movie. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and I can't wait to watch it again. So I'm really, really glad that we're doing this, because this is what I love. I love to be wrong. I absolutely love to be stupid in the past. I like to look at myself and go, wow, you were dumb. You were dumb. This movie rocks. And that's how I feel right now. So I'm taking the L that I was wrong, and I'm so glad about it. But yeah, anything else you want to say to close us out on Tar, either of you guys?
I guess to go first, I will continue holding my L to everyone out there, because I'm still not a huge fan of this movie. There's stuff I really appreciate, just, I don't know, the more the movie goes on, the more it loses me. And like, it's still like a weak 7 or strong 6, but this now, after rewatching everything besides, I think I have everything everywhere left. This would be my 10 slot in Best Picture. But as I've mentioned before, I think this is the best year for Best Picture since I've been alive. So being last this year would be like the 5 or 6 spot in most years.
That's pretty cool.
That's so true.
Anything you want to close us out with?
I think it was a movie that was perfectly made for the people that wanted to watch it. So
I think you can do no better than that. You give the audience what they want. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you tune in next time, as we're going to be talking Women Talking. But as always, my name is Matt.
And my name is Dyl, and this is Fantasy Filmball.